My daughter abandoned me on Christmas Day, running away with her husband and his parents on a trip that I paid $17,000 for. I was expecting family warmth, but found an empty house and a treacherous note. It turns out they had planned everything. They had a chat without me, where they made fun of my ATM. So I canceled everything. They called me 76 times, but they had no idea that this was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I expected the smell of bacon. Instead, I found silence. The kitchen table held a single piece of paper, folded once, positioned exactly where my coffee mug usually sat. My name was written across it in Nicole's careful handwriting. Nothing else disturbed the morning stillness. No laughter from the living room, no sounds of wrapping paper being torn, no excited voices discussing our upcoming vacation to Aspen. My hands trembled as I unfolded the note. Dad, we decided to go to Colorado without you. The family needs this time together. Just us. We'll be back January 2nd. Don't worry about the money. We know you can afford it. Thanks for everything. Love, Nicole. The paper slipped from my fingers. They were gone. On Christmas morning, after I'd spent $17,000 planning the perfect family vacation, after months of excited planning sessions where Nicole hugged me and called me the best father in the world, I walked through the house calling their names anyway. Nicole, Zachary, Howard, Kinsley. My voice echoed off empty walls. Their bedroom doors stood open, revealing hastily made beds. In Nicole's closet, the space where her large suitcase usually sat gaped empty. Zachary's shaving kit was missing from the bathroom counter. Back in the kitchen, I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers. Nicole's number went straight to voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice felt like mockery now. Nicole, it's Dad. I found your note. I don't understand what's happening. Please call me back. Zachary's phone rang once before clicking to voicemail, then Howard's, then Kinsley's. Each unanswered ring drove the truth deeper into my chest. This wasn't impulsive. They'd planned this. All of them. Together. I sank into my leather recliner, surrounded by wrapped presents I'd bought for people who'd abandoned me. The Christmas tree lights blinked steadily, illuminating gift tags written in my own careful handwriting. To Nicole, with love from Dad. To Zachary, hoping this year brings you everything you want. 3 months ago, I'd announced the vacation during Sunday dinner. Nicole had been struggling since her divorce, and Zachary's parents had never taken a real vacation. I wanted to give them something special. Aspen for New Year's, I'd said, pulling out the resort brochures. 7 days, all expenses paid. Skiing, spa treatments, the works. Nicole had thrown her arms around me. Dad, you're incredible. This is exactly what we all need. Zachary had shaken my hand firmly. Larry, this means everything to us. Truly. Howard and Kinsley had actually cried. We never dreamed we'd see a place like that, Howard had whispered. I'd felt so proud, so useful. Finally, I could create the kind of family memories that would last forever. Now I understood their tears differently. They'd been planning to exclude me even then, weighing how much my generosity could buy them versus how much they could tolerate my presence. I picked up our family photo from last Christmas. 5 smiling faces, Nicole's arm draped around my shoulders, Zachary giving me a thumbs up, Howard and Kinsley beaming with genuine warmth, or what I'd thought was genuine. Had they discussed it after I went to bed? Had they counted the days until they could take my money and leave me behind? The Mercedes keys sat on the kitchen counter where Nicole had left them. A final insult. They'd taken an Uber to the airport rather than drive my car, making sure I knew this wasn't about transportation. It was about choosing not to include me. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor. Merry Christmas, Larry! Hope you're having a wonderful morning with your family. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. They'd made their choice. They thought I was just a lonely old man with deep pockets and no backbone, someone who'd absorb their betrayal quietly and continue funding their lives without consequence. They were wrong. I walked to my office and opened the desk drawer where I kept all our vacation documents, confirmation numbers, resort information, payment receipts, everything they'd need for their perfect getaway, everything I still controlled. My finger hovered over the resort's phone number. Walking to my home office felt like crossing a bridge I could never return from. The organized filing cabinet stood exactly where I'd left it. 3 decades of meticulous record keeping, every receipt cataloged, every contract filed alphabetically. I pulled out the thick folder, labeled Aspen Vacation 2024. The little Nell's number was highlighted in yellow marker. I'd called them dozens of times during planning, discussing room upgrades and special requests. Now I dialed with different intentions. Good morning, Little Nell Resort. This is Rebecca speaking. How may I assist you? This is Larry Hughes. My family checked in last night under the Hughes reservation. I need to make some immediate changes. Oh, yes, Mr. Hughes. Your family arrived safely. They seemed so excited about their stay. What changes would you like to make? I opened my planning binder to the detailed itinerary I'd spent weeks crafting. I need to cancel the spa appointments scheduled for December 27th. All 5 of them. Sir, those are premium bookings during peak season. There will be significant cancellation fees. Cancel them. The keyboard clicking paused. Certainly, sir. Anything else? The private chef service for New Year's Eve. Cancel it. I drew a line through the $2,400 expense with my red pen. Mr. Hughes, that's a very popular service. Are you sure you don't want to reschedule instead? Cancel the ski lessons, all of them. Cancel the wine tasting tour. Cancel the private shopping appointment. Each cancellation felt like removing their names from my will, deliberate and final. Rebecca's professional composure cracked slightly. Sir, this represents most of your planned activities. Is everything all right? Everything is perfect. One more thing. Remove my credit card authorization for any additional charges. They can pay for their own extras now. I hung up before she could respond, and immediately opened my filing cabinet's bottom drawer. Inside sat folders containing 7 years of receipts. Every dollar I'd spent supporting Nicole and Zachary, organized by category and year. The university folder held $180,000 in tuition payments spread across 4 years. Nicole's psychology degree that she'd never used. I remembered her graduation day, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me, promising she'd make me proud. Wedding expenses. $65,000 for what Nicole called her fairy tale day. The venue, the flowers, the photographer. I'd written every check with joy, watching my daughter's dreams come true. Apartment down payment, $85,000. I'd structured it as a formal loan, not a gift. Smart business practice, even with family. The paperwork sat in its manila folder, Zachary's signature bold across the promissory note. My phone was already ringing before I'd finished reviewing the files. Larry? Merry Christmas, buddy. Michael Richardson's voice carried that relaxed holiday tone. My lawyer for 23 years. The man who'd handled my business sale and retirement planning. Michael, I need legal advice. Today. His pause told me he'd caught the edge in my voice. Larry, what's wrong? You sound different. My family went to Aspen without me on Christmas morning, after I paid $17,000 for their vacation. The words came out flat, businesslike. I want to know my legal options regarding the money I've lent them over the years. Wait, what? Nicole and Zachary left you on Christmas? Are you serious? Completely serious. They took my money and abandoned me. Now I want to know what I can legally recover. Michael's silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Larry, the apartment loan documentation we prepared is solid. It's a callable loan with 30-day notice. The credit cards you pay for can be canceled immediately. But are you sure you want to? Cancel the cards. Prepare the loan recall notice. I want everything ready by tomorrow morning. Larry, it's Christmas. Maybe we should think about mediation, family counseling. They made their choice, Michael. Now I'm making mine. After hanging up, I walked to my fireproof safe and withdrew the documents I'd hoped never to need. Every loan agreement, every co-signed lease, every financial guarantee I'd provided out of love and trust. They had no idea what was legally possible when generosity turned to betrayal. My phone started buzzing with an incoming call. Nicole's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my voice steady as granite. Hello, Nicole. Dad? Her voice cracked with panic. What did you do? They're saying all our reservations are canceled. The spa, the restaurants, everything. I canceled them. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then, you can't do that. We're already here. We planned this whole trip around those bookings. No, I planned this trip. You just decided to exclude me from it. Dad, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you coordinated leaving me alone on Christmas morning? How you took my $17,000 and abandoned me? My fingers drummed against the desk. There's nothing to explain, Nicole. Her breathing turned rapid, desperate. We can talk about this when we get back. We can work things out. Can we? Like we worked out telling me you were leaving? Dad, you're being unreasonable. I'm being practical. Michael Richardson is preparing the legal papers to call in your apartment loan. 30 days' notice, as specified in the contract you and Zachary signed. The phone went silent except for her sharp intake of breath. You wouldn't. I already have. Your credit cards will be canceled by noon today. Any bank guarantees I've signed are being revoked. I opened my safe and pulled out the thick stack of documents. Did you really think I kept no records of my generosity? Dad, stop, please. Now she was crying. We made a mistake, okay? We should have talked to you first. You made a choice. Now you live with the consequences. What about Howard and Kinsley? They've never done anything to hurt you. They're just innocent. They participated. They could have called me, warned me, refused to go. Instead, they chose sides. I flipped through the loan documents, each page crisp with legal authority. Everyone made their choice. This is insane. You can't destroy our lives over one mistake. One mistake? The words came out colder than I had intended. Nicole, this was an impulse. You planned this. You discussed it. You coordinated it. You booked transportation without telling me. This was calculated betrayal. Zachary's voice joined the call suddenly. Larry, this is getting out of hand. Let's talk like adults here. Adults don't abandon family members on Christmas morning, Zachary. Look, we thought you might enjoy some time alone. You're always saying how busy your social calendar is. Don't. My voice cut through his attempt at manipulation. Don't you dare try to reframe this as doing me a favor. You took my money and left me behind because you didn't want me there. That's not... I have the receipts, Zachary. Every payment I've made for your life. The apartment down payment, the credit cards, the car loan I co-signed, the wedding expenses, your parents' medical bills I paid last year. Each item landed like a hammer blow. Did you discuss those when you planned to exclude me? Howard's shaky voice came through the phone now. Larry, son, please. We never meant to hurt you. We thought the kids knew what they were doing. Howard, I'm not your son. Your son took my daughter and my money and left me alone on Christmas. Kinsley started crying in the background. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid, Nicole said through her tears. Your guilt trips. Your need to control everything with money. Something cold settled in my chest. Control? I gave you independence, education, a home, a career choice. Everything I did was to free you, not control you. But there were always strings attached, weren't there? Always conditions. The only condition was basic human decency. Apparently that was too much to ask. The hotel room fell quiet, except for muffled sobs. What do you want? Zachary asked finally. Money? An apology? What will it take to fix this? Fix this? I looked at the family photos on my desk, seeing strangers now. Zachary, you can't fix betrayal. You can only live with it. So that's it? You're going to destroy everything because your feelings got hurt? My hand tightened on the phone. My feelings didn't get hurt. My trust got shattered. There's a difference. Through their crying and arguing, I heard another sound. Someone knocking on their hotel room door. After hanging up, I needed quiet. The house felt different now. Larger, emptier, like a museum of misplaced trust. I'd grabbed a sandwich around noon, but barely tasted it. Now, walking through rooms I'd decorated for Christmas morning that never came, I felt like a detective in my own life. Nicole's bedroom door stood slightly open, the way she'd left it Christmas Eve. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. Her childhood photos smiled from the walls. Gymnastics, trophies, high school graduation, family vacations where everyone looked genuinely happy. Had I imagined all of it? The charging station on her nightstand caught my eye. Nicole's phone sat there, forgotten in their rush to the airport. She'd been texting frantically from Howard's phone during our call. I picked up the device, my thumb hovering over the screen. This felt like crossing a line, but they'd already crossed every line that mattered. The phone unlocked with her birthday, a password I'd helped her choose years ago for security. The messaging app showed dozens of unread notifications. I opened the group chat labeled Girls' Weekend Planning and immediately wished I hadn't. 2 weeks ago, Nicole. Dad's insisting on coming with us to Aspen. Jessica. Oof, that's rough. Can't you just tell him no? Nicole. You don't know my dad. He paid for everything, so he thinks he gets a vote. Sarah. Maybe he'd have fun, though. Nicole. Trust me, no. Zachary says the old man will just complain about everything being too expensive or too loud. My hands started shaking. Jessica. What about his parents? They seemed sweet when I met them. Nicole. Howard and Kinsley are actually cool. They'd be way more relaxed without Dad hovering around with his opinions. Sarah. Plus, you guys could actually party. Nicole. Exactly. This is supposed to be our vacation, not a family reunion with my walking ATM. I sat down hard on her bed, the phone trembling in my grip. 1 week ago, Nicole. Update. We figured out how to handle the dad situation. Jessica. Spill. Nicole. We're going to leave Christmas morning before he wakes up. Leave a note. Sarah. That's kind of brutal. Nicole. He'll get over it. Plus, Howard said they felt bad about taking so much money from him anyway. Jessica. Wait, so his in-laws are in on this? Nicole. They needed convincing, but Zachary explained how Dad makes everything about himself. The words blurred as I scrolled through more messages. Each one felt like a paper cut, small but accumulating into something unbearable. Nicole. Sometimes I think Dad forgets we're adults now. Sarah. At least he pays for everything. While Nicole. True. Silver lining of having an overprotective, rich dad. Jessica. Must be nice having a father who can afford to spoil you. Nicole. It comes with strings, though. He expects gratitude and family time in return. Sarah. Ugh. Emotional labor. I remembered the conversation from 2 weeks ago now. Zachary's suggestion hadn't been casual at all. Larry, don't you think it might be nice if just the younger generation went this time? He'd said over Sunday dinner. Nicole had jumped in immediately. Dad, you'd probably be more comfortable at home anyway. You always say how much you love having quiet time to read. I'd laughed, thinking they were joking, but I've been looking forward to this family time for months. The awkward silence that followed made sense now. They'd already decided. Howard and Kinsley had avoided my eyes because they knew. Everyone knew except me. 3 days ago, Nicole. Final check. Everyone's tickets confirmed? Jessica. You're really doing this, Nicole. It's better this way. Trust me. Dad will sulk for a week, then move on. Sarah. What if he doesn't? Nicole. What's he going to do? Cut me off? He's threatened that before and never follows through. Jessica. Maybe because he loves you. Nicole. Maybe, or maybe because he needs us more than we need him. I closed the messaging app and stared at the dark screen, seeing my reflection looking older than I remembered. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd mocked me. My generosity wasn't appreciated, it was expected. My desire for family connection wasn't cherished, it was tolerated. The phone buzzed with a new message from the group chat. Nicole. Emergency dad went nuclear. Canceled everything and threatened to call in the apartment loan. Jessica. Wait. What? Nicole. He's serious this time. We might have really screwed up. I set the phone back on the charging station and walked to my office, my footsteps echoing in the silent house. They thought they knew me. They thought I was predictable, manageable, someone who made empty threats and bought forgiveness with money. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My office had always been my sanctuary, mahogany desk, organized filing cabinets, everything in its place. Now it felt like a war room. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet, muscle memory from 30 years of running a construction business taking over. Column headers, date, category, amount, documentation status, legal structure. I started with Nicole's education. Row by row, I entered every tuition payment, every dormitory fee, every textbook purchase I'd covered. $45,000 per year for 4 years. The laptop's calculator showed $180,000 total. Wedding expenses came next, the venue Nicole had to have, the dress that cost more than most people's cars, the honeymoon to Bora Bora. Because we'll only do this once, Dad. Another $65,000. The apartment down payment made me pause. I'd been smart there, structuring it as a formal loan with Michael's help. $85,000 with a promissory note, signed by both Nicole and Zachary. Interest rate below market, but legally binding. Vehicle purchases: Nicole's BMW, $45,000, Zachary's truck, $35,000. Both loans I'd co-signed when their credit wasn't sufficient. Monthly support over the past 3 years averaged $2,500, rent, assistance, grocery money, insurance payments, emergency funds, another $90,000. The final total made me sit back in my chair. $15,000, $500,000 of documented generosity, repaid with calculated betrayal. I reached for my phone and dialed Michael's number. Larry, how are you holding up? I need an emergency meeting, tonight if possible. It's Christmas Day. Michael, I've just calculated over $500,000 in family support over the past decade. I need to know exactly what legal options that creates. Silence. Then, I'll meet you at my office at 5:30. Let me call David Cruz. You'll want tax implications reviewed too. Driving downtown felt surreal. Christmas lights twinkled on empty streets while I navigated toward a meeting that would change everything. Michael's building was dark, except for his 20th floor office windows. He met me at the elevator, his usually impeccable suit replaced by jeans and a sweater. Larry, in 23 years of representing you, I've never seen you like this. In 23 years, I've never been systematically betrayed by the people I love most. David joined us by video call from his home office, his background showing a Christmas tree with scattered wrapping paper. Larry, Michael filled me in. You're talking about significant asset recovery here. I spread my documentation across Michael's conference table. Tell me what I can legally do. Michael reviewed the apartment loan paperwork first. This is solid. You structured it perfectly. Callable with 30 days written notice, below market interest rate clearly documented as family assistance, completely enforceable. The credit cards. You're the primary account holder, they're authorized users. You can remove them immediately. Any debt they've accumulated on your cards becomes due on demand. David leaned forward on the screen. From a tax perspective, you've been treating monthly support as gifts under the annual exclusion limit. Smart. But the major items, education, wedding, apartment, those create legitimate debt instruments if the recipients breach trust. What about the car loans? You're guarantor on both. If they miss payments, you can demand immediate payoff or repossess through the lender. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. So they have no legal protection? Michael adjusted his glasses. Larry, they have no assets of their own, no independent income stream, and they've made themselves completely financially dependent on your goodwill. From a legal standpoint, you hold every card. The emotional fraud aspect? Harder to prove, but you have documented evidence of premeditated deception while accepting financial benefits. A court would view that very unfavorably. David added, plus there's the constructive trust doctrine. Money given under false pretenses can be recovered even if initially structured as gifts. Timeline for implementation? Michael pulled out his legal calendar. Credit cards can be canceled tonight. Apartment loan notice can be served tomorrow. They'll have 30 days from receipt. Vehicle loans can be called if they miss a single payment. And if they resist? Then we file for breach of trust, unjust enrichment, and fraudulent acceptance of benefits. With your documentation, it's not even a difficult case. I gathered the documents, each paper representing not just money, but years of love freely given and carefully betrayed. Draft everything, all of it. Larry, once we start this process, they started it when they planned to abandon me while taking my money. I'm finishing it. Michael nodded slowly and opened his laptop. I'll have preliminary documents ready by tomorrow morning. Outside, Christmas lights still twinkled, but they looked different now, like evidence markers at a crime scene. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app to begin the first phase. 4 days of preparation had transformed my house into a fortress of documentation. Legal papers organized in neat stacks, financial records cross-referenced, Michael's preliminary agreements reviewed and ready. When Zachary's truck pulled into my driveway at 6:30 on December 29th, I was watching from the living room window. They looked exactly as I'd expected. Wrinkled clothes, Nicole's eyes red-rimmed from crying, Howard and Kinsley trailing behind like reluctant participants in someone else's drama. 4 days in a roadside motel had stripped away their vacation confidence. I opened the door before they could knock. Larry. Zachary's voice carried forced authority, like a man trying to intimidate his way out of quicksand. "Come in." I stepped back without warmth, without the usual embrace I'd have offered before. Living room. Nicole rushed toward me with tears already flowing. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. We never meant for things to get so complicated." "Sit down, Nicole." She froze at my tone. Even Zachary looked surprised by the ice in my voice. Howard cleared his throat nervously. "Larry, son, maybe we should all take a breath here. These family misunderstandings happen." "This wasn't a misunderstanding." I remained standing while they settled uncomfortably on my furniture. "This was a coordinated decision to exclude me while accepting my financial support." Kinsley dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We thought you might enjoy some quiet time at home. It was supposed to be thoughtful." Thoughtful would have been asking. "What you did was plan my exclusion while ensuring I paid for your vacation." Nicole's tears intensified. "Daddy, please. It wasn't like that. We thought you'd appreciate having the house to yourself for once." "Stop." The word cut through her manipulation like a blade. "I've spent 4 days analyzing exactly what this family relationship has cost me financially. The numbers are illuminating." Zachary leaned forward aggressively. "What's that supposed to mean?" I walked to my desk and picked up the folder Michael had prepared. "It means I've reviewed every financial transaction between us over the past decade. $515,000 in documented support." The room went silent except for Kinsley's sharp intake of breath. "Your education, Nicole. Your wedding. Your apartment down payment, which was legally structured as a loan, not a gift, though you seem to have forgotten that detail." Nicole's face went white. "What do you mean loan?" "I mean you and Zachary signed promissory notes for $85,000 at below-market interest rates. Michael Richardson structured it properly to protect both parties." I opened the folder to show the documents. "The loan is callable with 30 days written notice." "You wouldn't—" "I already have. Notice was served yesterday by certified mail." Zachary shot to his feet. "This is insane. You can't destroy our lives over hurt feelings." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply calling in legitimate debts." I flipped to the next section. "Your credit cards were canceled effective January 1st. Car loan guarantees I provided are being reviewed for revocation." "Dad, stop this!" Nicole's voice cracked with real fear now. "We'll lose everything." "You should have considered that before planning my exclusion." Howard stood shakily. "Larry, surely we can work something out. Families shouldn't handle disagreements like business transactions." "You're right, Howard. Families should handle disagreements with honesty and respect. When you choose to handle family relationships like business transactions, taking money while providing no consideration in return, then I'll respond in kind." "Consideration?" Zachary's face flushed red. "We're your family. That should be enough." "Family members don't conspire to abandon each other on Christmas morning." Kinsley was crying openly now. "We never meant to hurt you. We just thought—" "You thought I was a convenient source of funding with no feelings to consider." I closed the folder. "You were wrong." Nicole collapsed back into the sofas, finally understanding the scope of her situation. "How much time do we have?" 30 days from receipt of notice for the apartment. Credit cards are already canceled. Car payments become your sole responsibility immediately." "We can't afford any of this without your help," she whispered. "Then you should have thought about that before you decided my presence was unwanted." Zachary paced toward the window, his hands clenched into fists. "This is blackmail. This is business. Something you should understand, given your eagerness to treat family relationships as financial transactions." Nicole looked up at me with desperation replacing manipulation. "What do you want? An apology? Groveling? What will it take to fix this?" I met her eyes without flinching. "You can't fix betrayal with apologies, Nicole. You can only live with the consequences." "So that's it?" Zachary spun around to face me. "You're going to financially destroy us because we took a vacation without you." "I'm going to treat you exactly the way you treated me, as people whose feelings and needs don't matter." The room fell silent except for the ticking of my grandfather clock. Finally, Zachary straightened his shoulders and looked directly at me. "We need time to figure this out. You have exactly the time specified in the legal documents, not 1 day more." As they filed toward the door, defeated and desperate, I knew they wouldn't accept this quietly. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Morning brought the satisfaction of systematic implementation. My desk was organized with contact lists, legal timelines, and action items, arranged in order of priority. 8 o'clock sharp, I made my first call. Michael, it's Larry. Time to file the apartment loan collection lawsuit. You're certain about this? Once we file, there's no going back without looking weak. File it. $85,000 plus accumulated interest and legal fees. Full collection action. I'll have it submitted within the hour. What about the credit cards? Calling the bank next. First National answered on the second ring. Mr. Hughes, how can we help you today? I need to remove Nicole Hughes as an authorized user on all my accounts, effective immediately. Certainly, sir. May I ask the reason for the removal? Business decision, family financial restructuring. The cards will be canceled within 24 hours. Any outstanding charges will remain on your primary account. Understood. Chase Auto Finance took longer to reach the right department. Mr. Hughes, you're calling about the guarantee removal on the Zachary Thompson vehicle loan. Correct. I want my financial guarantee removed from his loan agreement. Sir, that will require him to qualify independently or find another guarantor. If he cannot, the loan becomes immediately callable. That's his responsibility now. By 10 o'clock, every legal action was in motion. The satisfaction felt clean, businesslike. No emotion, just consequences for documented betrayal. My doorbell rang at 10:30. Nicole stood on my porch holding a manila envelope, tears already streaming. Daddy, my credit card was declined at the grocery store. The bank said you canceled my authorization. I removed you as an authorized user. The cards were mine, not yours. She pushed past me into the living room, opening the envelope to scatter family photos across my coffee table. Look at these. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike, my graduation, my wedding day where you walked me down the aisle? I remember paying for all of those occasions. How can you be so cold? I'm your daughter. Daughters don't conspire to abandon their fathers on Christmas morning. Zachary appeared in my doorway, phone pressed to his ear. No, I understand. Yes, the guarantee has been removed. He hung up and stared at me with barely controlled fury. The bank wants my car loan paid in full, or they'll repossess. I can't qualify for refinancing without your guarantee. Then you shouldn't have risked it by betraying my trust. Howard and Kinsley shuffled in behind their son, looking uncomfortable. Larry, surely we can work something out, Howard said. These are just family disagreements. We've all said things. This isn't about things we've said. This is about things you've done. Premeditated financial fraud, while accepting my generosity. Nicole's tears turned desperate. What do you want from us? Groveling? Public humiliation? Tell me what will fix this. Nothing will fix betrayal. You can only pay the legal consequences. Zachary stepped closer, his voice dropping to something that sounded almost like a threat. You know, Larry, family relationships go both ways. You might want to consider what happens when you're alone in this big house. Accidents happen to elderly people. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Could you repeat that, Zachary? My lawyer will be interested in documented intimidation attempts. His face flushed red. I wasn't threatening. You were implying that my age makes me vulnerable to accidents if I don't comply with your financial demands. That's textbook elder intimidation. Nicole grabbed Zachary's arm. Stop talking. You're making it worse. Worse than being financially destroyed by your own family? I looked directly at Zachary. I have security cameras recording this conversation. I have witnesses to your threatening behavior. Every word you've spoken is being documented for legal proceedings. Kinsley started crying. This isn't what families do to each other. Larry, you're destroying relationships that took decades to build. I didn't destroy them. I discovered they were already destroyed. You helped plan my exclusion while accepting my money. That destroyed the relationship. You thought I was a convenient ATM, with no feelings to consider. Zachary paced toward the window, his fists clenched. Fine. You want to play hardball? Two can play that game. This isn't a game. This is debt collection. You owe $85,000 plus interest. The court will decide if you pay voluntarily or through asset seizure. We'll see about that. Nicole gathered her photos with shaking hands. 30 days? 30 days from legal service. The clock started yesterday. As they reached my front door, Zachary turned back with cold calculation in his eyes. You know what your problem is, Larry? You think money makes you powerful. But power comes from having people who care about you. And you just threw that away. I watched them walk to their truck, noting how Zachary's hands trembled as he started the engine. They still didn't understand. I hadn't thrown anything away. I had simply stopped funding my own betrayal. New Year's Day brought the kind of quiet satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. The legal machinery was grinding forward exactly as planned, and I spent the afternoon reading in my study, occasionally glancing at the snow outside my window. At 2 o'clock, my phone rang. "Larry, it's Margaret." My cousin's voice carried an unusual tension. "I need to talk to you about something concerning." Margaret and I had maintained steady contact since childhood, built on mutual respect, and shared family history. If she sounded worried, I paid attention. "Of course. What's troubling you?" "I've received several phone calls today about you, from Nicole, Zachary, even Howard and Kinsley. They're all saying similar things, and frankly, Larry, it doesn't sound like the man I've known for 40 years. I set my book aside and focused completely. "What exactly are they saying?" "They claim you've become paranoid and suspicious since retirement. Nicole was crying, saying you've turned against your own family over money. Zachary insisted you're not thinking clearly and need intervention." The sophistication of their strategy impressed me despite my anger. "And what's your assessment of these claims?" "That's why I'm calling. 3 separate family members contacting me within 2 hours, all with nearly identical talking points. That's not organic family concern, Larry. That's coordination." Margaret's business background in marketing made her naturally suspicious of orchestrated campaigns. They're trying to paint you as mentally declining, while positioning themselves as victims trying to help their troubled patriarch. "What specifically did they claim?" "Nicole said you've become obsessed with money and are punishing her for wanting independence. Zachary suggested you're showing signs of cognitive decline and making irrational financial decisions. Howard added that they're all worried about your judgment." Each false claim landed like a calculated blow. They were attempting to undermine my credibility before I could damage theirs. "Margaret, are you familiar with the actual sequence of events that led to this situation?" "Only what they've told me, which is why I'm asking for your version." I spent 15 minutes providing the factual timeline, the planned vacation, their Christmas morning abandonment, the note, their coordinated exclusion while accepting my financial support. I kept emotion out of it, presenting only documented facts. That's quite different from what they described. Margaret's voice carried new understanding. "They made it sound like you suddenly became unreasonable about normal family independence. They conspired to abandon me on Christmas morning after I paid $17,000 for their vacation. When I implemented legal consequences for their documented loans and financial obligations, they escalated to intimidation and now reputation management. Larry, I'm going to ask you something directly. Are you experiencing any cognitive issues, any changes in judgment or decision-making?" The question didn't offend me. It was exactly what a concerned relative should ask when presented with conflicting narratives. My lawyer, Michael Richardson, has worked with me on these legal actions. My accountant, David Cruz, reviewed all financial documentation. Both professionals can attest to my mental acuity. The family simply doesn't want to face legal consequences for their calculated betrayal. That aligns with the Larry I know. The man who built and successfully sold a construction company doesn't suddenly become paranoid over normal family dynamics. Margaret, I appreciate your call more than you know. How many other relatives have they contacted? I suspect they're working through the family directory systematically. Your brother Robert, cousin Janet, probably your neighbors too. The scope of their campaign exceeded my initial assessment. They were attempting comprehensive reputation destruction to pressure me into backing down from legal actions. Are you willing to help me document their false claims? Absolutely. What they're doing is character assassination, and it's not going to work on people who know you. After hanging up, I opened a new document on my laptop. If they wanted to wage reputation warfare, I would respond with the same systematic approach I'd used for their financial betrayal. The family had just escalated from threatening my safety to attacking my character. They were about to learn that this was an even bigger mistake. Evening brought the satisfaction of documentation. I'd spent the day creating a systematic response to their reputation campaign, timeline of events, professional references, character witnesses. Margaret had provided detailed accounts of their coordinated phone calls. By 7:30, I was reading in my living room when headlights swept across my window. Zachary's truck pulled into my driveway with unnecessary aggression, tires squealing slightly on the pavement. Through the window, I watched him slam the door and stride toward my house with the body language of someone who'd run out of reasonable options. I activated my security system from the discreet panel beside my chair. 6 cameras covering all approaches to the house, everything recording automatically to cloud storage. 30 years of running a construction business had taught me the value of documenting confrontations. His pounding on my front door sounded more like demands than requests. "Open up, Larry. We need to talk." I opened the door but remained in the threshold, maintaining control of the space. "Good evening, Zachary." "Don't give me that polite nonsense." He pushed past me into the living room, his movements jerky with barely controlled fury. "You think you can destroy my family with your legal games?" "I think I can collect legitimate debts through proper legal channels." "Legal channels?" His voice rose to something approaching shouting. "You're ruining our lives over hurt feelings." "I'm exercising contractual rights over documented loans." Zachary moved closer, using his height and 40-year age advantage to loom over me. "You know what happens to stubborn old men who live alone in big houses like this?" I met his stare without flinching. "What happens, Zachary?" "Accidents, break-ins. Bad things happen when neighbors can't hear you calling for help." His voice dropped to something that sounded almost casual. "Your fancy alarm system won't help if you have a medical emergency, or if someone decides you need to learn a lesson about family loyalty." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality to someone who seems confused about his situation." He gestured around my living room. "You're 62 years old, living alone, no family support anymore. Things could get very difficult for you if you don't stop this legal nonsense." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his words. "That's an interesting perspective. Would you like to see something?" Without waiting for an answer, I walked toward my home office. Zachary followed, probably thinking he'd intimidated me into compliance. "See, the thing about living alone in a big house," I said, opening my office door, "is that you can afford proper security measures." The wall of monitors showed 6 different camera angles of my property, including perfect footage of Zachary's arrival and our entire conversation. His face went white as he recognized himself on screen, making threats to an elderly man. "You can't record me without permission." "This is my private property. I can record anyone who enters." I pointed to the timestamp showing his threats from 3 minutes earlier. "Everything automatically uploads to secure cloud storage. My lawyer, Michael Richardson, receives copies of all security footage." Zachary stared at the screens with growing panic. "You have to delete this." "I don't have to do anything except provide evidence to law enforcement when elderly persons are threatened in their own homes." "Delete it, Larry. I wasn't serious about..." "About what? Medical emergencies? Break-ins? Teaching me lessons about family loyalty?" I picked up my phone. Threatening an elderly person is a serious crime in Michigan, especially with documented evidence. "You can't call the police over a conversation." "I can call them about criminal intimidation and threats against a senior citizen." I dialed 911, which carries enhanced penalties under Michigan law. 911, what's your emergency?" "This is Larry Hughes at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. I need police response for criminal threats made against me by a family member. I'm 62 years old, and the suspect is still in my home making threats about accidents and break-ins." Zachary's face went from anger to pure panic. "Hang up. I'll leave right now." "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" the dispatcher asked. "The suspect is agitated, but I have him on security camera. I have video evidence of the threats." "Officers are dispatched. Please stay on the line." 2 patrol cars arrived within 8 minutes. I provided the officers with printed screenshots of Zachary making threats, along with the audio recording. Michigan's enhanced penalties for crimes against elderly persons made this a priority: arrest. "Mr. Thompson, you're under arrest for criminal intimidation and threatening an elderly person," the lead officer announced, producing handcuffs. Zachary's hands shook as they cuffed him. "This is insane. He's my wife's father." "That makes it worse, sir. Family relationship doesn't excuse threatening behavior. As they led him to the patrol car, Zachary looked back at me with something approaching desperation. You don't know what you're doing, Larry. This won't end the way you think. I watched the taillights disappear down my street, then called Michael Richardson to inform him about our newest legal development. The court documents arrived on a snowy Tuesday morning, delivered by Michael Richardson with the satisfaction of a man who'd orchestrated a perfect legal victory. I spread them across my dining room table like a general, reviewing successful battle plans. Complete judgment in your favor, Michael announced, setting his briefcase beside the papers. $85,000 recovered through apartment sale, all credit obligations transferred back to primary borrowers, criminal charges proceeding separately. The numbers were more satisfying than I'd anticipated. Not just the money, though recovering every penny felt appropriate, but the systematic nature of justice served through proper legal channels. Zachary's employment situation. Criminal record for threatening an elderly person makes him essentially unemployable in any professional capacity. Most employers run background checks now. I reviewed the property sale documents. Their apartment had sold within a week to cash buyers. The real estate market didn't care about family drama, only market values and clear titles. Vehicle repossession completed yesterday, Michael continued. Bank moved quickly once the guarantee removal was processed. They're using public transportation now. Through my network of neighbors and acquaintances, I'd learned the family was crowded into Howard and Kinsley's one-bedroom apartment. 5 adults sharing space designed for 2, with Nicole working retail for the first time since college, and Zachary unable to find employment. At noon, I watched them walk up my driveway. All 5 of them moved differently now, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, the body language of people who'd learned the cost of betrayal. Nicole led the group, her face red from crying even before reaching my door. I let them inside without the formality of being asked. Dad, Nicole's voice cracked immediately. We need to talk. They arranged themselves in my living room like supplicants before a judge. Howard and Kinsley looked exhausted, aged beyond their years by stress and crowded living conditions. Zachary couldn't meet my eyes. I'm listening. We were wrong. Nicole's words came out rushed, desperate, completely, totally wrong about everything. The vacation, leaving you behind, the way we treated your generosity, all of it. Zachary forced himself to look at me. I made terrible mistakes, Larry. The threats, the things I said. I was scared and stupid, and I hurt you when you'd only ever helped us. Howard cleared his throat nervously. Larry, son, we're too old to support everyone. Kinsley and I, we can't. Our pension wasn't meant for 5 people. We're still family, Kinsley added quietly. Despite everything that's happened, we're still family. I studied their faces, looking for signs of the same calculation I'd seen before. But desperation had stripped away pretense. These were people who'd learned the difference between genuine remorse and strategic manipulation. Tell me about the planning, I said. Nicole flinched. What planning? The Christmas vacation conspiracy. How long did you discuss excluding me? Who suggested it first? When did you decide to coordinate leaving me behind? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Nicole looked at Zachary, who looked at his parents, who looked back at Nicole. It wasn't... Nicole started, then stopped. Zachary brought it up first, maybe 3 weeks before Christmas. He said it might be more relaxing without you there. And you agreed. I did. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I agreed because I wanted a vacation where I didn't have to be grateful all the time, where I could just exist without feeling like I owed someone everything. The honesty was more devastating than any lie would have been. Howard, Kinsley, your participation? Howard's hands shook slightly. We knew it was wrong when we agreed, but Zachary convinced us you'd understand eventually, that you'd prefer quiet time alone. So you coordinated leaving me alone on Christmas morning after I'd paid $17,000 for your vacation. Yes. Nicole's admission came out like a confession. We planned it. We discussed it. We knew exactly what we were doing, and we did it anyway. I sat back in my chair, processing their complete capitulation. No excuses, no justifications, no attempts to minimize their choices. What do you want from me now? Forgiveness, Nicole whispered. A chance to make it right, Zachary added. Help, Howard said simply. I looked at each of them. my daughter who'd inherited my business sense but not my integrity, my son-in-law who'd learned the cost of threatening those who'd supported him, the elderly couple who'd chosen convenience over character. If I were to consider any future relationship, I said slowly, it would require conditions. Hope flickered in their eyes like candle flames in wind. Complete honesty about your motivations and planning. No more coordination behind my back. An acknowledgement that trust, once broken, must be rebuilt through consistent actions over time. They nodded eagerly, desperately. But first, I continued, you need to understand exactly how much your betrayal cost, not just financially, but personally. I walked to my office and returned with Nicole's phone. The next afternoon brought another performance, though this one was more polished than their previous attempts. I watched through my living room window as they approached my front door, Nicole clutching a bouquet of expensive white lilies, the flowers I'd brought to her mother's funeral 15 years ago. They'd prepared more carefully this time. Nicole's tears started before she even knocked, timed perfectly for maximum emotional impact. Zachary positioned himself slightly behind her with practiced humility, head bowed at precisely the right angle. I opened the door to find Nicole's carefully crafted breakdown already in progress. "Daddy!" She pressed the flowers into my hands while sobbing with theatrical precision. "I love you so much, and I'm so sorry for everything we did to you." The others filed in behind her like a choreographed funeral procession. Zachary's apology came on cue. "Larry, I've spent every night thinking about what I said to you, what I threatened. I learned my lesson about respecting the man who gave us everything. I understand now." Howard and Kinsley provided the perfect elderly backdrop, their genuine distress mixed with practiced support for their children's performance. "We just want our family whole again," Kinsley whispered. "Life's too short for all this anger and separation." Nicole collapsed onto my sofa with calculated vulnerability. "I know we hurt you terribly, but I promise, I swear, I'll be the daughter you deserve. I'll make everything right." As she spoke, I noticed her phone positioned carefully against the cushion, screen facing toward our conversation. The small red recording dot was barely visible, but it was there. "Tell me more about making things right," I said, settling into my chair with strategic distance. "I understand now that taking your generosity for granted was wrong," Nicole continued, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of rehearsed sincerity. "I see how much you've sacrificed for us, how much you've given, and I want to earn your love back." Zachary glanced at his watch, a quick, almost unconscious gesture that contradicted his claims about this being the most important moment of his life. "I'm ready to prove my gratitude every single day," he added, checking the time again while speaking about eternal appreciation. The disconnect between their words and behavior created a fascinating study in deception. Nicole's tears appeared genuine, but her strategic phone positioning revealed calculation. Zachary's apologies sounded memorized, delivered between obvious time checks that suggested somewhere else he needed to be. "Howard, Kinsley, what are your thoughts on rebuilding family trust?" I asked. "We believe in forgiveness," Howard answered carefully. "People make mistakes, but families should find ways to move forward together. Even when those mistakes involve systematic planning and coordination." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Nicole adjusted her phone's position, subtle but noticeable if you were watching for deceptive behavior. "We all regret the planning aspect," Zachary said, glancing at his watch again. "It was wrong to coordinate excluding you. We understand that now." "Do you?" I looked directly at Nicole. "What exactly do you understand about coordination and planning?" Her carefully prepared composure flickered for just a moment. "I understand that we made decisions as a group that hurt you individually, and that was selfish and cruel." The answer was too polished, too therapeutic sounding, like something coached by someone who'd researched family reconciliation tactics online. "Nicole, you seem distracted by something on your phone." She went rigid. "My phone? No, I'm completely focused on you, Dad, on us, on fixing this." But her eyes had darted to the device involuntarily, confirming what I'd already observed. She was recording our conversation, probably planning to use selective clips for social media, sympathy, or legal documentation. "Zachary, you keep checking your watch." Do you have somewhere more important to be? His face flushed. No, this is the most important thing in my life right now. I was just... Nervous habit. The lies layered upon lies with increasing transparency. 40 years of business negotiations had taught me to read people's true priorities behind their stated intentions. These people were performing repentance, not feeling it. I appreciate you all coming, I said, standing up to signal the conversation's end. This has been very educational. Nicole's panic was immediate and visible. Educational? Dad, what do you mean? We're trying to apologize, to make things right. You're trying to manipulate me with a performance while secretly recording our conversation for your own purposes. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Nicole's hand moved instinctively toward her phone, confirming my observation. I wasn't. I would never. You positioned your phone to record this conversation from the moment you sat down. Zachary checked his watch 6 times during his speech about how this moment means everything to him. Your apologies sound rehearsed because they are rehearsed. Zachary's defensive anger flared immediately. You're being paranoid. We came here genuinely. You came here with another manipulation strategy because the last one failed. The room fell silent except for the Kinsley's quiet crying. I had hoped, I continued, that losing everything might teach you the difference between genuine remorse and strategic performance. Apparently, it hasn't. Nicole tried one last desperate appeal. Please, Dad, we need you. We have nothing left. You have exactly what you chose when you decided to betray my trust while pretending to value it. I walked toward the front door, opening it deliberately. But before you leave, I said, returning to my chair, there's one more thing you need to understand about what you lost. I picked up her phone from my office and unlocked it with her birthday. 3 weeks passed like the turning of legal documents. Methodical, final, irreversible. I spent those days completing what they'd started with their betrayal, the systematic severing of all connections between us. Michael Richardson delivered the final paperwork on a crisp February morning. Property transfers complete, he announced, setting down the thick folder. $85,000 recovered and deposited, all credit guarantees revoked and processed. Legally speaking, you have no financial obligations to any of them. Estate planning? Well, updated per your instructions. Primary beneficiaries are now Margaret and the Detroit Children's Hospital. Family members specifically excluded with documented reasons. The legal completeness felt satisfying in a way that emotional victories never could. Every document represented a choice they'd made and a consequence they'd earned. Through Margaret's updates, I learned they'd relocated to a small town near Cleveland where Howard's brother owned a trailer park. 5 adults sharing a single-wide mobile home, Nicole working 2 retail jobs, Zachary's criminal record preventing steady employment. Natural consequences flowing from natural choices. The letter arrived on February 1st. Nicole's handwriting had always been careful, but desperation made it shaky now. The envelope was thin. Discount stationery. No return address. I opened it at my kitchen table while drinking coffee that I'd bought, without considering anyone else's preferences. Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but I have to try. We're living in Uncle Bob's trailer park now. Zachary, me, Howard, Kinsley, and Bob's family, all sharing a single mobile home. The kids sleep on air mattresses in the living room. I'm working at a grocery store and a gas station just to help with groceries. Zachary can't find anything steady because of his record. Howard's blood pressure medication costs more than we can afford, and Kinsley's arthritis is getting worse from the stress. I'm not asking for much, just enough to get us a small apartment so the older folks can have some dignity. Maybe $500 a month? I know I was wrong about everything, but we're family. Please, Dad, we've learned our lesson. Love, Nicole. I read it twice, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd come to expect, but desperation had stripped away the calculated appeals, leaving only genuine need and the same fundamental misunderstanding that had started everything. She still thought this was about punishment rather than consequences, still believed family obligation trumped personal responsibility, still assumed my resources existed to solve problems created by her choices. I folded the letter and filed it with the other legal documents. No response was necessary. After decades of supporting ungrateful dependents, silence felt appropriate. That afternoon, I called Margaret. "How are you adjusting to your newfound freedom?" she asked. "Better than expected. I'm planning dinner at that Italian place downtown next week. Would you like to join me?" "I'd love to. It's been too long since you socialized without worrying about family drama." "Much too long." After hanging up, I made other calls. My old business partner, David, wanted to discuss investment opportunities. My neighbor, Robert, had mentioned a community theater group. There were hiking clubs, book discussions, travel groups, entire worlds I'd neglected while funding other people's dreams. The phone number for the senior singles group sat on my desk. At 62, dating felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. But meeting someone who valued conversation over credit cards, companionship over financial support, seemed worth exploring. I walked through my house that evening, seeing spaces differently. The dining room where they'd plotted my exclusion could host dinner parties for people who actually enjoyed my company. The guest bedrooms could welcome visitors who came for relationship rather than resources. Justice hadn't required dramatic confrontations or elaborate revenge schemes. It had simply required stopping the flow of unearned benefits to people who'd confused generosity with obligation. They'd taught me a valuable lesson about the difference between family by blood and family by choice. Some people prove themselves worthy of trust and support through their actions. Others prove themselves unworthy through theirs. My calendar for next month was filling with possibilities. Theater tickets with Margaret, investment meetings with David, hiking trails with the outdoor club, activities chosen for my own interests rather than other people's expectations. The house felt lighter somehow, as if removing toxic relationships had improved the actual air quality. For the first time in years, I was planning a future based on my own hopes rather than other people's needs. At 62, I was finally free to discover what genuine relationships looked like when built on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The adventure was just beginning. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. My son threw my life's possessions into the trash, and his wife sneered, "You're not needed anymore. Get out." I stood among my broken memories, smiled, and made one call. 3 days later, they were frantically searching for me, leaving 76 missed calls. They thought they'd erased me, but they were wrong. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The first thing I noticed wasn't the house. It was the pile. My pickup truck coughed to a stop in front of what used to feel like home, and there it was, a mountain of belongings scattered beside the dumpster like yesterday's garbage. Cardboard boxes torn open, contents spilling onto the pavement in a chaos I couldn't quite process. Those are my things. The thought hit me before I even turned off the engine. My hands stayed gripped on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the worn leather. 3 days of fishing up at Lucky Peak had left me tired but peaceful. That peace evaporated like morning mist. I climbed out slowly, my joints protesting after the long drive. The cool May afternoon carried the smell of rain and something else, the musty odor of clothes that had been sitting outside too long. My work boots crunched on gravel as I approached the pile, each step feeling heavier than the last. There, half buried under a tangle of winter coats, was the photo, our wedding picture from 42 years ago. The glass was cracked diagonally across Martha's face, her smile split by a jagged line. Dirt clung to the silver frame I'd polished just last month. Someone made a mistake. This has to be a mistake. But the evidence kept mounting. My anniversary watch, the Timex Martha had saved 3 months to buy me, lay face down in a puddle, its crystal shattered. The leather band was soaked through, probably ruined. I picked it up with shaking fingers, water dripping between my knuckles. My fishing gear was scattered everywhere. Tackle boxes split open, lures and sinkers mixing with kitchen utensils and old photographs. The rod I'd used for 20 years lay snapped in half, its guides torn away like broken teeth. Someone had thrown my entire life onto the street with all the care they'd give to actual trash. The boxes told their own story, hastily packed, roughly handled, torn at the corners where they'd been dragged or dropped. My name was still visible on one side, written in Martha's careful handwriting from our last move. The ink had run in the damp air, making my own name look like a watercolor mistake. I found my work shirts in a heap, the ones I'd worn to the factory for 30 years. Oil stains and all, they'd been mine. Now they lay wrinkled and dirty, trampled by whoever had hauled them out here. My steel-toed boots, the good pair I kept for church and special occasions, sat upside down with mud caked in the treads. What the hell happened here? The question burned in my chest as I stood surrounded by the debris of my life. Neighbors' windows remained dark despite the commotion. No one came out to explain or help. The entire street felt hollow, like everyone was holding their breath and waiting for me to disappear. My phone buzzed against my hip. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe Floyd calling to explain. Maybe someone from the city saying they'd made an error. But it was just a text from the bait shop, confirming my receipt from this morning, the normal world continuing while mine fell apart. I reached down and lifted Martha's jewelry box, its wooden surface scratched and one corner dented. The velvet lining had come loose, and her few precious pieces were scattered in the dirt. Her mother's ring, the one she'd planned to pass down to Floyd's future daughter. Now it was coated in grime, lying next to a bottle cap and cigarette butts. The reality settled over me like a cold fog. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately packed up everything I owned and thrown it away like refuse. Someone had made a choice to destroy 40 years of careful preservation, 40 years of memories, 40 years of building a life. I straightened up, my back aching from bending over the scattered belongings. The house loomed in front of me, its windows dark and unwelcoming. I needed answers. I needed to understand why my entire existence was now decorating the street like a yard sale gone wrong. Time to find out what's really going on here. I walked toward the front door, stepping over more scattered papers and broken picture frames. Each footstep felt deliberate now, purposeful. Someone was going to explain this mess, and they were going to explain it right now. The key slid into the lock, turned halfway, then stopped dead. I tried again, applying more pressure, wiggling the metal back and forth like I'd done 1,000 times before. Nothing. The lock refused to budge, as solid and unyielding as if I'd been trying to open a bank vault with a butter knife. They changed the locks. They actually changed the locks on my own house. My hands were shaking now, making it harder to work the key. I pulled it out and examined it closely, as if the brass might have somehow transformed during my fishing trip. Same worn edges, same scratches I'd memorized over the years. The lock was different, not the key. I fumbled for my phone, scrolling through contacts with clumsy fingers. Floyd first. He'd explain this mess, sort everything out. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before clicking to voicemail. His voice cheerful and recorded. "You've reached Floyd Riley. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." "Floyd, it's Dad. I just got back from fishing and all my stuff is on the street. The locks are changed. What's going on? Call me back right away." I tried Pamela next, though talking to my daughter-in-law always felt like walking through a minefield. Same result, straight to voicemail. Her message was shorter, crisper. "You know what to do." Standing there on my own front porch, locked out like a stranger, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't some mix-up or emergency repair. Someone had planned this. Someone had waited for me to leave town, then systematically erased me from the place I'd called home for 15 years. The afternoon shadows were getting longer, and the spring air carried a chill that hadn't been there an hour ago. I walked across the yards to Simon's house, my neighbor of 8 years. If anyone knew what had happened, it would be him. The man noticed everything, which newspapers people read, when they left for work, who visited when. I knocked on his door, 3 sharp raps that echoed in the quiet street. Footsteps approached, cautious and measured. The door opened just wide enough for Simon's weathered face to appear, his eyes darting past me toward my scattered belongings. "Simon, do you know what happened here? All my stuff is on the street, and I can't get into my house." His expression shifted, uncomfortable and evasive. "Sorry, Otis. I haven't noticed anything unusual. Maybe some kind of mistake." "Mistake?" I gestured toward the pile of my possessions. "That's 40 years of my life sitting next to the garbage. Someone changed my locks while I was gone fishing. You had to have seen something." Simon's gaze flickered away, focusing on something behind my shoulder. "I've been busy with my garden, Didn't really pay attention to what was happening over there. The lie hung between us like smoke. Simon had been retired for 6 years and spent most days positioned at his front window, watching the neighborhood like a security guard. He knew exactly what had happened, but he wasn't going to tell me. Look, if you need somewhere to make phone calls or wait for your family, you're welcome to. Thanks, but I'll manage. He nodded quickly, clearly relieved. Well, I hope you get it sorted out. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing alone on his porch. Even Simon, who'd borrowed my tools and shared beers on summer evenings, was cutting me loose. Whatever had happened here, the whole neighborhood was in on it or too scared to get involved. I walked back to my belongings, each step heavier than the last. The pile looked even more pathetic in the fading light, like the remnants of someone's entire existence scattered for the world to see. I found an old lawn chair among the debris, aluminum frame bent but still functional, and set it up next to the largest box. My phone showed no new messages. I tried Floyd again, then Pamela. Both calls went straight to voicemail without even ringing this time. Either their phones were off, or they were deliberately avoiding me. Given the evidence surrounding me, I was betting on the latter. The street grew quieter as dinner time approached. Other houses showed signs of life, lights coming on, garage doors opening as people returned from work. But nobody stopped to ask if I needed help or wondered why an elderly man was sitting among garbage bags full of possessions. They all seemed to know something I didn't. I settled deeper into the chair, pulling my jacket tighter against the cooling air. Whatever game was being played here, I was apparently the only one who didn't know the rules. But I'd learned patience in 65 years of living, and stubbornness in 30 years of factory work. I could wait. They'd have to come home eventually, and when they did, I'd get my answers. The sky was beginning to turn purple at the edges, and streetlights were starting to flicker on one by one. I checked my phone again, still nothing. But I wasn't going anywhere, not until someone explained why my entire life had been thrown away like yesterday's trash. I had nowhere else to go anyway. 4 hours passed like a slow bleed. I'd sorted through most of my belongings by the time their car pulled into the driveway. Some things were salvageable, clothes that could be washed, books that had only gotten damp. Other items were ruined beyond repair, casualties of their hasty eviction. The anniversary watch was definitely gone, its face clouded with moisture and hands frozen at 2:17. The Honda Civic's headlights swept across the pile as Pamela parked, illuminating the chaos like a crime scene. I stood up from the lawn chair, my joints screaming after hours of sitting in the cool air. Relief flooded through me despite everything. Finally, someone who could explain this nightmare. Floyd got out of the passenger side, his movements careful and deliberate. He looked older than his 42 years, shoulders slumped under the weight of something I couldn't identify. Pamela emerged from the driver's side with her usual brisk efficiency, her blonde hair perfect despite the long day. "Floyd! Pamela! Thank goodness you're here." I walked toward them, gesturing at the scattered belongings. What happened? Why are my things on the street? I can't get into the house. Someone changed the locks while I was fishing. Pamela didn't break stride, walking past me like I was invisible. She pulled grocery bags from the trunk with sharp, angry movements. When she finally looked at me, her expression was cold enough to freeze water. "Because you're no longer needed here, Otis." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, blinking in confusion. "What do you mean, not needed? This is my home. I live here." "Lived," she corrected, slamming the trunk shut. "Past tense. The mortgage is paid off now. Your job here is done. Take your junk and get out." "My job?" The phrase made no sense. "Pamela, I don't understand what you're talking about. This is my house. I've been paying the mortgage for—" "Exactly?" Her smile was sharp as broken glass. "You paid it off. Mission accomplished. We don't need you anymore." I turned to Floyd, desperate for sanity in this madness. "Son, what is she talking about? Tell me what's going on here." Floyd couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the ground, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, like a guilty child. "Sorry, Dad," he mumbled, barely audible. "We tried to make it work, but—" "But what?" I reached toward him, and he actually flinched away from my touch. "Floyd, look at me. I'm your father. I've lived in this house for 15 years. I pay for the groceries, the utilities, the repairs. This is my home." Pamela laughed. a sound like breaking ceramic. Your home? You were a tenant, Otis. A very useful tenant, who paid all our bills and asked for nothing in return. But tenants can be evicted when they're no longer convenient. The cruelty of it stole my breath. I looked between them, my son avoiding my gaze, my daughter-in-law smiling with obvious satisfaction. The streetlight cast harsh shadows across their faces, making them look like strangers. I helped you buy this house, I said slowly, each word carefully measured. When you couldn't qualify for the mortgage, I co-signed. When you couldn't make the payments, I covered them. When you needed a down payment for Floyd's car, I gave you my savings. Everything I had, I gave to this family. And we're grateful, Pamela said with mock sincerity. Really, we are. But gratitude doesn't mean we have to house you forever. You're old, Otis. You take up space. You track mud through my clean house. You leave dishes in the sink and watch television too loud. We want our lives back. Floyd shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. My own son, standing there while his wife dismantled our relationship with surgical precision. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, supported through college, reduced to a silent accomplice in my exile. Where am I supposed to go? The question came out smaller than I intended, tinged with a vulnerability that made me hate myself. That's not our problem anymore. Pamela headed toward the front door, grocery bags in hand. You're a grown man. Figure it out. Floyd. I tried one last time, putting every ounce of paternal authority into his name. Look at me, son. He raised his eyes for just a moment, and what I saw there was worse than hatred. It was nothing. Complete, empty indifference, like I was already dead to him. The locks are changed, Pamela called over her shoulder. Don't try to get in. I'll call the police if I have to. The front door opened and closed, leaving me alone under the streetlight with my scattered possessions. The porch light came on, then immediately went off again, a clear message that I wasn't welcome even near the entrance. I stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. 42 years of fatherhood, erased. 15 years of generosity, forgotten. A lifetime of love and sacrifice, dismissed like an inconvenient bill. But beneath the hurt, something else was growing, something harder and colder than the evening air. They thought they could use me up and throw me away like garbage. They thought they could steal everything I'd worked for and then lock me out of my own life. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through my bones. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the house that had been my home for 15 years. The porch light went dark again, leaving me in the amber glow of the streetlight. 8 years. 8 years since that conversation in the kitchen when Floyd had looked me in the eyes and promised we'd always be family. His voice came back to me, younger and full of hope. Dad, if you help us with the mortgage, we'll always be together. This is our family home now. I could see him so clearly in my memory, leaning against the counter with that earnest expression he'd inherited from his mother. Pamela had been there too, her hair shorter then, her smile warmer. Or maybe it had just seemed warmer because I'd wanted to believe it. You'll always have a home with us, Mr. Riley, she'd said, using my formal name like she always did back then. We want you to feel like this is your place too. How naive I'd been. How desperate to believe that my son still needed me, still wanted me around. Martha had been gone 2 years by then, and the house felt too empty, too quiet. When Floyd called about their mortgage troubles, I jumped at the chance to help, not just with money, with belonging somewhere again. Family takes care of family, I'd told them, signing the papers that made me responsible for their debt. Of course I'll help. Floyd had hugged me that day. Actually hugged me, something he hadn't done since his teenage years. I promise, Dad, you'll never regret this. Never regret this. The words tasted bitter now. I thought about the gradual changes, how the first few years had been good. Family dinners, holiday celebrations, Floyd asking my advice about work problems. I'd felt useful, needed, but somewhere around 2020, things began shifting. Invitations to dinner became less frequent. Conversations grew shorter. My opinions were dismissed more quickly. By 2023, I was eating most meals alone in my room. Pamela would sigh when I used the kitchen, as if my presence was an inconvenience she barely tolerated. Floyd stopped asking for advice and started looking through me instead of at me. They'd developed a language of glances and subtle signals that excluded me completely, but I'd told myself it was temporary stress. Floyd's job, Pamela's moods, the usual ups and downs of family life. I'd made excuses for them the way parents do, finding reasons to justify behavior that grew increasingly cold and dismissive. The pattern was clear now, viewed from this side of betrayal. The closer we got to paying off the mortgage, the worse they treated me, as if my usefulness had an expiration date tied directly to the loan balance. Every payment I made toward their debt was one step closer to my eviction. They'd been planning this. Maybe not from the beginning, but certainly for months. You don't change locks on impulse. You don't pack someone's entire life into boxes without forethought. This had been calculated, methodical, timed perfectly for my fishing trip. 8 years of mortgage payments, 8 years of buying groceries, paying utilities, covering repairs, 8 years of believing I was investing in family when I was actually funding my own disposal. The street was quiet, except for the distant hum of highway traffic. Other houses showed signs of normal family life, television screens flickering behind curtains, porch lights welcoming people home. But nobody emerged to check on the old man standing among garbage bags full of belongings. Even in suburbia, people minded their own business when it came to family drama. I pulled my jacket tighter against the evening chill. Standing here, feeling sorry for myself, wouldn't change anything. Floyd had made his choice, and it wasn't me. Pamela had won whatever game she'd been playing all these years. They'd gotten what they wanted, a paid-off house and freedom from the inconvenience of gratitude. But they'd made one critical error in their calculations. They'd assumed I was powerless, that an old man with nowhere to go would simply disappear quietly into whatever assistance programs existed for discarded parents. They'd treated me like I was already dead, just a burden waiting to be buried. Time to show them how wrong they were. I turned away from the house and walked back toward my scattered belongings, my footsteps steady and purposeful. The pile looked different now, not like trash, but like evidence. I approached my scattered possessions with a mechanic's eye, assessing what could be salvaged and what deserved to be abandoned. 40 years of factory work had taught me to think systematically, to solve problems through careful analysis rather than emotional reaction. This was just another problem requiring a practical solution. The wedding photo went into the cab of my truck first, cracked glass and all. Some things were worth preserving regardless of damage. Martha's jewelry box followed, along with the few pieces of her mother's costume jewelry that had survived Pamela's hasty packing. Not valuable to anyone else, but priceless to me. My work tools were scattered among the clothes and household items. The socket set I'd owned for 30 years, still in perfect condition. The level that had helped me build Floyd's treehouse when he was 8. These tools had value beyond sentiment. They represented skills and capabilities that Floyd and Pamela had forgotten I possessed. I loaded them carefully into the truck bed, each wrench and screwdriver finding its proper place in the toolbox. Organization mattered. Preparation mattered. If I was going to rebuild my life from scratch at 65, I'd need every advantage I could gather. The clothes were a mixed blessing. Most of my work shirts had survived intact, along with several pairs of jeans and my winter coat. The formal wear was ruined. The suit I'd worn to Martha's funeral was stained and wrinkled beyond recovery. But I wouldn't need formal clothes for what came next. A car slowed as it passed, the driver craning his neck to stare at the old man loading garbage into a pickup truck. I met his gaze steadily until he looked away and drove on. Let them stare. Let the whole neighborhood see what Floyd and Pamela had done. Shame was a tool that cut both ways. My fishing gear had taken a beating, but most of it was salvageable. The broken rod could be replaced, and the tackle boxes just needed reorganizing. Fishing had always been my escape, my time to think clearly without interference. I'd need that clarity in the coming weeks. Papers and documents were scattered like leaves after a storm. I gathered them methodically. Insurance policies, bank statements, tax returns. Important information that Floyd and Pamela had thrown away as carelessly as everything else. Did they think I existed only within the walls of their house? Did they imagine I had no financial life beyond paying their bills? That was their second critical error. They knew I had savings. They'd seen me write checks for their expenses year after year, but they'd never bothered to learn the full extent of my resources, To them, I was just a convenient source of monthly payments, not a man who'd worked steadily for 40 years and lived below his means. The anniversary watch was beyond repair, its crystal shattered and movement flooded. I held it for a moment, remembering Martha's pride when she'd presented it to me wrapped in newspaper, because we couldn't afford fancy gift paper back then. Then I dropped it into one of the damaged boxes I was leaving behind. Some symbols of the past needed to stay buried. Simon's house remained dark, though I could see the faint glow of a television through his living room curtains, probably watching me through a gap in the blinds, cataloging details he could share with other neighbors tomorrow. The whole street would know about Floyd's ingratitude by morning, though none of them would intervene. Suburban politeness had its limits. 43 years I'd worked to support this family. First Martha and baby Floyd when money was tight and factory jobs were uncertain. Then just Floyd through his teenage years, college tuition, and early career struggles. Finally, Floyd and Pamela, helping them achieve the middle-class stability I'd never quite managed for myself. Time for a return on that investment. The truck bed was nearly full now, packed with everything that mattered. I'd have to leave some furniture behind, the dresser Martha had refinished, the recliner where I'd watch television most evenings. But material possessions were just weight now. I needed mobility, flexibility, freedom to act without encumbrance. I took one last look around the debris field that had been my life 2 hours ago. Amazing how quickly 40 years could be reduced to what fit in a pickup truck. But reduction also meant distillation, keeping only what was essential, valuable, meaningful. Floyd and Pamela thought they'd won by throwing me away. They thought clearing me out of their house would clear me out of their lives. They'd underestimated the difference between disposing of someone and actually getting rid of them. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine caught immediately, reliable machinery responding to experienced hands. In the rearview mirror, I could see the house growing smaller as I drove away, its windows dark and unwelcoming. But I wasn't disappearing into the night like they expected. I was just changing positions, moving to higher ground where I could see the whole battlefield clearly. Time to show them what 43 years of experience looked like when it stopped being grateful. The Budget Inn's neon sign flickered red against the darkness as I pulled into the parking lot. The place looked exactly like what it was, a highway motel for travelers who needed basic shelter without frills. 2 stories of identical doors, ice machines humming at each end, and the persistent smell of highway exhaust mixed with industrial cleaning supplies, perfect for someone who needed to disappear temporarily while planning his next move. The desk clerk was maybe 25, college-aged with tired eyes and the practiced indifference of someone working the night shift. He barely looked up from his magazine when I approached the counter. "How many nights?" he asked, sliding a registration form across the laminated surface. "Just one for now," I replied, signing my name carefully. "We'll see how it goes from there." Room 127 was exactly what I'd expected. A double bed with a floral comforter that had seen better decades, a small table by the window, and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. The carpet showed traffic patterns from thousands of previous guests, and the heater rattled when it kicked on. But it was clean, private, and $50 for the night. I'd stayed in worse places during my factory years. I carried my boxes inside one at a time, my back protesting after the long day. The truck could stay loaded with everything else. No point unpacking what I'd just have to pack again. But I needed the essentials. Clothes for tomorrow, Martha's jewelry box, and the folder of important papers I'd rescued from the debris. The fluorescent bathroom light was harsh after the warm glow of streetlights. In the mirror, I looked older than I'd felt this morning. The day had carved new lines around my eyes, added weight to my shoulders. But my hands were steady, my mind clear. That's what mattered now. I arranged Martha's jewelry box and our wedding photo on the bedside table, creating a small shrine of memory in this temporary space. The cracked glass split her smile in half, but her eyes were unchanged, bright with the optimism that had carried us through 38 years of marriage. She'd known how to love without conditions, how to build rather than destroy. "I should have done this years ago," I told her picture quietly. "Should have seen what they were doing before it got this far." But regret was luxury I couldn't afford. Martha had died believing Floyd was a good man who'd take care of his aging father. I wouldn't dishonor her memory by letting her faith prove unfounded. The motel bed was firm but narrow, nothing like the king-size mattress I'd slept on for the past 8 years. Highway noise filtered through thin walls, trucks downshifting, cars accelerating toward distant destinations. Other guests moving through their own temporary existences, carrying their own problems from one place to another. I lay awake most of the night, not from discomfort, but from mental activity. My mind was processing 8 years of gradual manipulation, cataloging moments I'd misunderstood or ignored. How many times had Pamela made subtle comments about my age, my habits, my inconvenience? How often had Floyd sided with her against me without saying anything directly? The pattern was unmistakable once I stopped making excuses for them. Every kindness I'd shown had been treated as obligation. Every sacrifice had been accepted as my natural duty. They'd trained me to be grateful for less and less until I was grateful just to exist in their space. But they'd made one fundamental miscalculation. They'd assumed that dependency ran only one direction, that I needed them more than they needed me. They'd forgotten that 8 years of mortgage payments created legal relationships beyond family sentiment. They'd overlooked the paperwork they'd signed when I helped them qualify for the loan. By 6 in the morning, I was fully dressed and ready to act. The shower had been lukewarm at best, and the coffee from the lobby machine tasted like it had been brewed sometime last week. But discomfort was temporary. What mattered was momentum, moving forward with purpose instead of wallowing in self-pity. I loaded my remaining belongings back into the truck and checked out at the front desk. The same clerk was still there, looking even more tired after his all-night shift. "Everything work out okay?" he asked automatically. "Better than expected," I replied, meaning it. The morning air was crisp and full of possibility. I had money in the bank, skills that were still valuable, and legal options that Floyd and Pamela didn't know existed. Most importantly, I had the advantage of being underestimated by people who thought they understood me completely. Time to educate them about their mistake. I started the truck and pulled out onto the highway, heading back toward Boise with the same sense of purpose I'd felt 40 years ago when I'd started my first real job. There was work to be done, problems to solve, and justice to serve. Floyd and Pamela had wanted me out of their lives. They were about to discover that sometimes you get exactly what you ask for. The phone book was thin in my hands as I searched for attorneys who worked weekends. Robert Chen's advertisement stood out. Immigration and property law, emergency consultations available. His office number connected me to a tired but professional voice that suggested Saturday morning appointments were possible for urgent matters. "Mr. Chen, I need to urgently clarify property ownership matters. There's been a family dispute about a house I've been living in, and I need to understand my legal position. Can you bring the relevant documents? Mortgage papers, deed, anything showing your involvement in the property?" I spread the papers I'd rescued from the debris across the motel bed. Everything was there. Loan documents, property tax receipts, insurance policies. 40 years of factory work had taught me to keep records, even when other people handled the details. The drive downtown took 20 minutes through quiet Saturday morning streets. Boise looked different from this perspective, less like the city where my son had betrayed me, more like a place where business got done regardless of family drama. Professional buildings stood ready to solve problems for people willing to pay consultation fees. Chen's office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brick building near the Capitol. The waiting room was small but clean, decorated with certificates and photographs of successful clients. I was the only person there, clutching a manila folder that might contain my future. Robert Chen turned out to be a compact man in his mid-40s, wearing weekend casual clothes but maintaining professional demeanor. He gestured me into his office and accepted the folder with careful attention to detail. "Tell me about the situation first, then we'll review the documents." I explained the basics without emotional embellishment. 8 years of mortgage payments, gradual deterioration of family relationships, sudden eviction and lock changes. Chen nodded occasionally, making notes on a legal pad. "Now let's see what the paperwork tells us." He spread the documents across his desk systematically, examining each page with the methodical attention I recognized from my own work habits. When he reached the original deed and mortgage agreement, his eyebrows raised slightly. "Mr. Riley, according to these documents, you are the sole owner of the property in question?" The words hung in the air like smoke from a welding torch. "What about the mortgage? Floyd and Pamela live there. They said I was helping them buy their house. The mortgage was issued in your name only. You qualified for the loan, you've made all the payments, and the property tax records show you as the official owner. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal claim to the house whatsoever." Chen turned the deed toward me, pointing to the relevant sections. My name appeared in all the critical places: borrower, owner, responsible party. Floyd and Pamela were nowhere to be found in the legal language that actually mattered. But they live there. They've been treating it like their home for 8 years. Living in a property doesn't establish ownership. At best, they could be considered tenants, though I don't see any formal lease agreement. Legally, you have every right to reclaim your property and evict any unauthorized occupants. The satisfaction started in my chest and spread outward like warmth from a good meal. 8 years of being treated like a burden. 8 years of having my generosity thrown back at me. 8 years of watching my son choose his wife over his father. And all along, they'd been living in my house, eating food I bought, using utilities I paid for, in a home they had no legal right to occupy. "What are my options?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the growing excitement. "You could demand they vacate immediately. You could begin formal eviction proceedings. You could sell the property and force them to relocate. As the legal owner, you have considerable leverage in this situation." Chen reviewed the documents once more, checking details with professional thoroughness. "The mortgage has been fully satisfied as of last month. You own the property free and clear, worth approximately $400,000 in today's market." $400,000? I'd been living like a charity case in my own $400,000 house, grateful for the privilege of paying other people's bills. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. I'd like copies of everything that establishes my ownership, and I'll need recommendations for a good realtor. Chen efficiently prepared copies while explaining the legal protections of property ownership. Within an hour, I had documentation proving beyond question that Floyd and Pamela had been living rent-free in my house for 8 years. The spring morning felt different as I walked back to my truck. Warmer, brighter, full of possibilities that hadn't existed an hour earlier. I wasn't a homeless old man begging for shelter. I was a property owner who'd been temporarily inconvenienced by squatters. Time to reclaim what was mine and show them the difference between charity and ownership. Walsh Realty's parking lot was empty except for one car when I arrived that afternoon. Sandra Walsh turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s, who apparently worked weekends for clients serious about buying or selling. Her handshake was firm, her smile professional, and her questions direct. "Mr. Riley, what kind of timeline are we looking at for your property sale?" "As quickly as possible. I need the house listed immediately and shown to serious buyers starting Monday." She pulled up property records on her computer, nodding as details filled the screen. "This is a nice neighborhood. 4-bedroom colonial, good condition from the photos I can see online. What's your asking price range?" "Market value, but the buyer must be ready to move in immediately. The current occupants will need to relocate quickly." Sandra's expression flickered slightly, probably wondering about family dynamics, but she maintained professional focus. "What about the current occupants? Do they need time to find new housing?" "That's no longer my concern. They're adults. They'll figure something out." The coldness in my own voice surprised me, but it felt appropriate. 8 years of concern for Floyd and Pamela's comfort had gotten me thrown out like garbage. Time to prioritize my own interests for a change. We spent an hour reviewing market conditions, pricing strategies, and showing schedules. Sandra was efficient and thorough, treating the sale like any other business transaction. By 4 o'clock, I'd signed listing agreements and arranged for professional photography, Monday morning. "I'll have the property on the MLS system by Tuesday," Sandra promised. "Given the market conditions and location, I expect serious interest within the first week." Perfect. By the time Floyd and Pamela realized what was happening, their housing situation would already be beyond their control. The apartment search took less effort than expected. The third complex I visited had a furnished one-bedroom, available immediately. Clean, basic, month-to-month lease for someone in transition. The manager was happy to expedite the application for a cash deposit and first month's rent. "How long will you be staying?" she asked while processing my credit check. "Until my other housing situation is resolved. Could be a few weeks, could be longer." By 6 o'clock, I was moving my essential belongings from the motel to the apartment. Not much to transport, a few boxes of clothes, important papers, Martha's jewelry box, and my tools. Everything else could wait in the truck until I decided what came next. The apartment was anonymous and temporary, exactly what I needed. Basic furniture, functioning appliances, cable television, and most importantly, a phone line for coordinating the house sale. I arranged my few possessions efficiently, creating a command center for monitoring the situation. I called Sandra from the apartment phone, confirming Monday's photography session and Tuesday's listing activation. "Mrs. Walsh, I want you to know I'll be traveling next week. The house should be shown to any qualified buyers, regardless of whether the current occupants are cooperative." "That's understood, Mr. Riley. As the owner, you have full authority over showing schedules." The legal ownership felt more real each time someone acknowledged it professionally. For 8 years, I'd lived like a guest in my own house. Now, strangers were treating me with the respect that property ownership commanded. I spent the evening organizing my documents and planning next steps. The house would be listed Tuesday. Showings would begin immediately. Serious buyers typically needed 2 to 3 weeks for financing and inspections. Floyd and Pamela would probably discover the sale sometime in the first week, depending on how quickly news traveled through the neighborhood. By then, I'd be unreachable, and the process would be irreversible. I dialed Sandra's number one more time before bed. "Mrs. Walsh, one more thing. I'll be out of town for a while, but you have my full authorization to proceed with all aspects of the sale. Accept any reasonable offer that meets our minimum price. I'll keep you informed of all developments, Mr. Riley." But I wouldn't be available for updates. That was the beauty of the plan. By the time Floyd and Pamela realized their comfortable life was disappearing, I'd be somewhere they couldn't reach me to beg, threaten, or manipulate. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic sounds. Tomorrow, I'd implement the final phase of my strategy. For tonight, I could rest, knowing that justice was finally in motion. 8 years of taking me for granted was about to cost them everything they thought they owned. Sunday morning found me at Boise Airport with a single carry-on bag and no particular destination in mind. The ticket counter agent was helpful when I explained my situation. "I'd like to book a flight somewhere warm. Doesn't matter where, as long as I can leave today." She checked availability while I stood there feeling lighter than I had in years. No schedule to maintain, no one expecting me home, no family obligations to consider, just an old man with savings in the bank and time to spend however he chose. "There's a flight to Cancun leaving in 3 hours. It's expensive for last-minute booking, but they have seats available." "Perfect. Book it." The airport process felt foreign after years of staying close to home. Security lines, boarding announcements, the controlled chaos of people traveling to places that mattered to them. I'd forgotten how exciting movement could be when you chose it yourself, instead of having it forced on you. The flight attendant noticed my relaxed demeanor during boarding. "Vacation travel?" she asked while checking my seat assignment. "Something like that. Haven't been somewhere warm in years. Figured it was time to change that." 3 hours later, I was stepping off an airplane into Mexican heat that felt like a blessing after Idaho's stubborn spring cold. Cancun Airport buzzed with tourists and resort representatives, everyone eager to begin or end their temporary escape from reality. The hotel shuttle driver spoke broken English, but perfect enthusiasm. "First time in Mexico, senor?" "First time anywhere in a long time," I admitted, watching unfamiliar landscape roll past the windows. The resort turned out to be exactly what someone fleeing family drama needed. Anonymous, comfortable, and completely disconnected from any responsibilities back home. The front desk clerk handled check-in with cheerful efficiency. "How long will you be staying with us, Mr. Riley?" "Open-ended. I'll let you know when I'm ready to leave." He handed me a key card and information packet about resort amenities. Pool service, beach access, restaurants, activities for guests who wanted structured entertainment, all of it available to someone who just reclaimed ownership of his own life. My room faced the ocean through sliding glass doors that opened onto a private balcony. The sound of waves replaced the memory of suburban silence, and warm air carried scents of salt and tropical vegetation instead of disappointment and betrayal. I stood there for several minutes, letting the contrast wash over me. The first order of business was turning off my phone. Floyd and Pamela would eventually realize something was wrong when they couldn't reach me, but by then the house sale would be in motion and my location would be irrelevant. Let them wonder where I'd gone and why I wasn't available to explain or negotiate. Room service brought lunch to the balcony. Fresh fish, cold beer, fruit that actually tasted like it had grown in sunshine. Simple pleasures that felt revolutionary after months of eating alone in my bedroom, while my own family treated me like an unwelcome boarder. The beach was populated with couples and families enjoying vacations they'd planned and saved for. I found an empty chair under an umbrella and settled in with a book I'd bought at the airport. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be and nothing to prove to anyone. A server approached with the kind of attention that money and leisure commanded. "Another beer, senor? Perhaps something from our cocktail menu?" "Why not? Bring me something tropical. I'm celebrating." "Celebrating what, if you don't mind my asking?" "Freedom," I said, meaning it completely. The afternoon dissolved into a pleasant haze of warmth, alcohol, and the satisfaction that comes from making decisions without consulting anyone else's opinion. Other resort guests moved through their own vacation rhythms, but I was operating on a different timeline entirely. By evening, I was sitting on my balcony watching the sunset paint the ocean in colors I'd forgotten existed. The contrast with Friday night, sitting among garbage bags on a suburban street, was so complete it felt like someone else's memory. Tomorrow, Sandra would begin photographing the house for listing. By Tuesday, Floyd and Pamela would discover their comfortable arrangement was about to change permanently. They'd probably try calling me first, then panicking when they realized I was unreachable. But I'd be here, learning how to relax again while they learned what consequences felt like. The waves kept rolling in with rhythmic persistence, washing away whatever they encountered and starting fresh with each cycle. Sometimes that's exactly what life required, complete erasure of what came before, followed by the patience to build something better. I raised my drink to the darkening sky, toasting the end of being grateful for scraps and the beginning of claiming what was rightfully mine. Monday morning in Cancun arrived with perfect weather and room service coffee that actually tasted like it had been made this century. I spent the early hours on my balcony reading a paperback thriller while waves rolled endlessly onto white sand below. Other resort guests were starting their vacation routines, couples heading to breakfast, families organizing beach gear, groups planning excursions to Mayan ruins, all of them blissfully unaware that hundreds of miles north, a real-life drama was about to unfold. Around 10 o'clock local time, I decided to check my phone. The screen exploded with notifications. 76 missed calls, 43 voicemails, and dozens of text messages. The numbers kept climbing as new calls came in while I scrolled through the chaos. Floyd's number appeared most frequently, but Pamela had contributed her share of desperation to the digital pile. The first few voicemails were confused but demanding, Floyd's voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Dad, call me back immediately. There are people walking through our house taking pictures. What the heck is going on?" Pamela, sharper and more accusatory. "Otis, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to stop this right now. Call us back." But as the hours progressed, the tone shifted dramatically. Anger gave way to confusion, confusion to panic, panic to desperation. Floyd again, hours later. "Dad, please, we can't reach you anywhere. The realtor says she's working for you. This can't be legal. Where are you?" Pamela, her voice cracking. "Otis, this is our home. You can't just sell our house out from under us. We've been calling everyone we know." I found Sandra Walsh's messages scattered among the family chaos, professional updates delivered with business-like efficiency that contrasted sharply with the emotional meltdown happening elsewhere. Her text from this morning was particularly satisfying. "Mr. Riley, excellent showing yesterday. Young couple very interested, mentioned they could close quickly. They love the neighborhood and see themselves raising children there. We'll keep you posted on developments. Perfect. New owners who would actually appreciate the house instead of treating it like a burden they'd inherited. The voicemails continued throughout the day, each one more desperate than the last. Floyd's voice deteriorated from anger to pleading to something approaching genuine fear. Dad, if you can hear this, we're sorry about how things went. Maybe we can work something out. Please just call us back so we can talk. Pamela tried a different approach, alternating between manipulation and outright begging. Otis, think about what you're doing. We have nowhere to go. Surely you don't want to make us homeless? You're not that cruel. But the most revealing message came late in the afternoon, Floyd's voice barely holding together. Dad, I keep thinking about that night when you came back from fishing, the way Pamela talked to you, the way I just stood there and let it happen. I know we messed up, but selling the house won't fix anything. Please just call me back. Finally, some recognition of consequences. Only took them discovering they weren't actually in control of their own living situation. I responded to Sandra's messages with professional efficiency, authorizing additional showings and confirming my interest in serious offers. But the family calls went unanswered. They'd made it clear a month ago that I wasn't needed in their lives. Time for them to experience what not needed actually looked like when the roles were reversed. The resort bar served excellent margaritas with fresh lime and salt that tasted like vacation instead of responsibility. I settled into a poolside chair with my phone silenced, watching families enjoy their temporary paradise while mine imploded in ways they were only beginning to understand. 8 years of mortgage payments had bought me more than just legal ownership. They'd purchased the right to choose who deserved explanations and who deserved silence. Floyd and Pamela had spent those 8 years teaching me that family loyalty was conditional, that gratitude had expiration dates, and that love could be discarded when it became inconvenient. Well, they'd been excellent teachers. Time to show them how well I'd learned their lessons. I extended my stay at the resort for another week, informing the front desk that my plans had become more flexible than originally anticipated. The afternoon stretched ahead, with nothing more demanding than deciding whether to order fish or chicken for dinner. Back in Boise, the phone calls would continue. The panic would intensify. The reality of their situation would sink in with each unanswered ring. But that was their problem now, not mine. 3 weeks later, I returned to Boise with a tan that spoke of extended leisure and a perspective that distance had clarified. The flight from Cancun landed on schedule, and the taxi ride to my downtown apartment felt like visiting a different city. The spring weather had warmed considerably, transforming the landscape from the gray uncertainty I'd left behind to something approaching summer optimism. Even the downtown streets looked more welcoming, though that might have been the effect of no longer feeling trapped by other people's expectations. I was pulling my suitcase from the taxi trunk when familiar voices called my name from across the parking lot. Floyd and Pamela approached like refugees from their own lives. 3 weeks of searching had left visible marks. Floyd looked 10 pounds thinner, his usual neat appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and hollow eyes. Pamela's perfectly maintained image had cracked, revealing someone who'd spent too many sleepless nights, facing consequences she'd never considered possible. Otis! Finally! Pamela's voice carried relief mixed with desperation. We've been looking everywhere for you. Floyd stayed slightly behind his wife, unable to meet my eyes directly. Dad, please, we need to talk. Don't sell the house. We can work something out. I set my suitcase down carefully, noting how their voices had changed. A month ago, they'd spoken to me with dismissive authority. Now they sounded like people begging for something they couldn't afford to lose. Work out what exactly? I kept my voice level, professional. What is there to discuss? We drove to every friend you've ever mentioned, Pamela said, words rushing together. Your old co-workers, that fishing club, even Martha's sister in Twin Falls. Nobody knew where you'd gone. We were desperate. The word hung between us like smoke. Desperate. A month ago, I'd been the desperate one, sitting among garbage bags while they locked me out of my own house. The symmetry was almost poetic. Interesting choice of words. I picked up my suitcase handle. A month ago, you told me I wasn't needed anymore. Remember? Floyd finally looked up, his face showing the kind of regret that only comes from watching comfortable assumptions crumble in real time. Dad, we made a mistake. Maybe we spoke too quickly, acted too harshly. Maybe. The word came out sharper than I had intended. You threw my belongings on the street like garbage. You changed the locks on my own house. You told me to disappear from your lives. And now you're surprised that I took your advice? Pamela tried a different approach, her voice taking on the manipulative tone I'd heard her use with store clerks and service representatives. Otis, you're hurting us to hurt us. This isn't about justice. It's about revenge. Revenge? I almost laughed. Pamela, I'm selling my house. My house, which I own, which I paid for, which you have no legal claim to whatsoever. How exactly is disposing of my own property revenge? The legal reality hit them like cold water. For 8 years, they'd lived as if the house belonged to them, as if my contributions were voluntary charity rather than an owner maintaining his own property. They'd convinced themselves that possession meant ownership, that living somewhere created rights. We checked with lawyers, Floyd said quietly. They told us. They explained about the deed, the mortgage papers. Then you understand the situation. I started walking toward the apartment building entrance. You're squatting in my house. I'm selling it. The new owners will decide whether they want tenants. They followed me across the parking lot, their desperation growing more evident with each step. 3 weeks of searching for someone who didn't want to be found had apparently taught them the difference between control and dependence. Dad, we're family, Floyd's voice cracked on the last word. I stopped walking and turned to face him directly. Family? A month ago, you stood there while your wife told me I wasn't needed anymore. You watched her throw me out like trash, and you said nothing. You chose her over me, Floyd. That was your decision to make, and you made it. We can pay rent, Pamela interjected desperately. Whatever the new owners want, we'll pay it. That's between you and them, I replied, resuming my walk toward the building. I'll give them your number if they're interested in tenants. The apartment building lobby felt like sanctuary after 3 weeks of ocean views, but for different reasons. This was temporary shelter, but it was shelter I'd chosen, paid for with my own money, free from the obligations and resentments that had poisoned the house they still thought of as home. They continued talking behind me, their voices blending into a desperate chorus of promises they should have made a month ago. But promises offered under duress weren't worth much. They'd shown me their true feelings when they thought I had no power to resist. Now that the power had shifted, their sudden appreciation felt exactly as sincere as it actually was. The elevator doors closed on their continuing pleas, but I could still hear their voices echoing in the lobby as I rose to the 4th floor. My apartment felt exactly as I'd left it, temporary but peaceful, free from the accumulated resentments that had made the house feel like a prison. I unpacked methodically, hanging vacation clothes that smelled like ocean air and possibility instead of obligation and disappointment. When Floyd and Pamela knocked on my door 20 minutes later, I was ready for them. The sale closes tomorrow, I said through the chain lock. You have 1 week to pack your belongings and vacate the property. After that, you'll need to discuss housing arrangements with the new owners. Dad, we're your family. Floyd's voice was breaking completely now. Family? I opened the door wider so they could see my face clearly. A month ago, you threw me out like garbage. You told me I wasn't needed. You changed the locks on my own house. Remember those exact words, Pamela? Take your junk and get out. Pamela tried one last manipulation. We can pay rent to the new owners. We have good credit, steady income. That's not my concern anymore. I started closing the door. You wanted me out of your lives. Congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for. Please, Floyd put his hand against the door frame. We'll do anything. We can change. You had 8 years to change. 8 years to show gratitude instead of entitlement. 8 years to treat me like family instead of a convenient ATM machine. I stepped back from the door. The new owners are a young couple with children. They'll actually appreciate the house instead of treating it like something they're entitled to. The door closed with a soft click, cutting off their final attempts at negotiation. I spent Tuesday morning at the title company, signing papers that transferred ownership from myself to David and Jennifer Morrison, newlyweds who'd fallen in love with the house and planned to raise their family there. They were everything Floyd and Pamela weren't. Grateful, enthusiastic, financially responsible, and genuinely excited about homeownership. "Thank you for accepting our offer so quickly," Jennifer said as we completed the paperwork. "We know other people were interested." "You reminded me why houses exist," I replied. "They're for families who want to build something together, not for people who take blessing for granted." The check for $395,000 felt surprisingly light in my hands. Numbers on paper representing 40 years of work, 8 years of mortgage payments, and 1 month of learning that family loyalty wasn't always reciprocal. But it also represented freedom. Freedom from ungrateful relatives. Freedom from living situations based on guilt rather than respect. Freedom to choose how I spent my remaining years without considering other people's convenience. Sandra Walsh handled the final details with professional efficiency. "The new owners take possession Friday morning. I assume the current occupants will be ready to move?" "That's not my responsibility anymore," I said, meaning it completely. By Thursday, I'd closed my downtown apartment lease and loaded my truck with everything I actually needed. The rest, furniture, household items, accumulated objects from a life that no longer existed, went to charity. Martha would have approved of the simplicity. Friday morning found me driving north toward Coeur d'Alene, where lake views and mountain air promised the kind of peace that came from choosing your own neighbors instead of being stuck with relatives who confused proximity with loyalty. The radio played classic country music as I drove through changing landscape, each mile putting more distance between myself and 8 years of being taken for granted. In my rearview mirror, Boise shrank to highway perspective. Just another city where someone had learned the difference between charity and ownership. Floyd and Pamela would figure out their housing situation eventually. Maybe the new owners would rent to them. Maybe they'd find somewhere else. Either way, they'd face their future without the safety net they'd spent 8 years assuming would always catch them. Justice didn't require cruelty, just consequences. They'd taught me that family was conditional, that gratitude had limits, that love could be discarded when it became inconvenient. I'd proven to be an excellent student. The highway stretched ahead like possibility itself, leading toward a life where appreciation wouldn't be taken for granted and family would mean something deeper than convenient obligation. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people experience the natural results of their own choices. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.